and invite everybody to remain standing to say the reopening karakia this time. Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, ehi aki ana te atakurua. He tio, he oka, he hauhu, ti he Māori. If you please take a seat. If you could please note the meeting is being live streamed. Welcome back to the media who are here. Nice to see you, George and Jen. Please let me know, or Democratic Services know, if you intend to leave the meeting early. You will be, what time? 4:30. Well, there's always a vague chance we'll finish it by then. But right, just in terms of the process that we're going to go through, I'm just going to say a few introductory remarks, and then, and they are very much going to be introductory remarks, and then I'm going to ask Karen. Go on, Karen. Welcome, nice to have you here. Karen to come up and just say a few words. Then there'll be an opportunity, councillors, because I know some of you want to ask some questions either of officers or of audit in terms of the revised document that's in front of you, and I think that's fair enough. So we'll do that. Then we'll go through the debate process, and finally we'll get to sign the audit off. So look, in terms of just a quick intro, first of all, I just want to record my thanks again to all the people who've put in an enormous amount of work. At the beginning of this process, it was fair to say I thought we were running at 100 miles an hour trying to get everything ready, a complex process, and we got 36 hours notice of some things. I think it's about 36 minutes of some of these things, and now we've got to this end. So things are still, it's what we have in front of us is a very complicated audit process. I know Barbara has said to you that she thought it was the most complicated process that she's been through. And the reason for that, really quite simply, is that we are facing a lot of challenges or a lot of opportunities, and we're facing them all at once, and we can't duck them. They've all landed on us, and we have to deal with them. So I just wanted to say thank you to all the staff who worked really, really hard. I want to thank you all councillors for the hard work that you've put in. Karen, I know you and your team have put in a lot of work, and I also recognise Wellington Water here, Jeff and Julie, good to have you here, and thank you for all the work that you've put in to meet both audit requirements but also the work that's going on to try and restore our water network to the standards that are required. That's all I'm going to say to start with, other than I've got to deal with these again, these niceties. I don't, because we've already dealt with them in the first half, so that's fine. Okay, so Karen, would you like to come and join us? Welcome. The other thing, just as Karen does come up, is I really do have to say to you again, this is not an opportunity to change things. We are really here to make some comments that you want to make, but we can't change things at this stage. Otherwise, we'll end up with sending Karen away to do even more auditing, and we will miss all sorts of deadlines, and that is obviously completely untenable. Karen, welcome.
Martin's in our specialist audit assurance team. Martin was been involved in the audit as a specialist around asset management processes. So I'm very happy to report that we have completed our audit, and subject to the adoption of the consultation document, we'll be in a position to issue our audit opinion. The audit opinion I'll be issuing today is a qualified audit opinion. It is qualified in two respects, which I will talk to. So our audit consists of auditing the consultation document to form a view as to whether it was provided an effective basis for public consultation about the proposed content of the long-term plan. So we looked at whether the consultation document represents the matters proposed to be included in the long-term plan. Did it identify the main issues, risks and challenges faced by the council and the consequences of those choices? We also looked at the underlying information and assumptions in the consultation document and formed a view as to the reasonableness of those. So the basis of our qualified audit opinion, the first aspect is around infrastructural asset condition information. So the council has been facing challenges with its ageing Three Waters network. Many of the assets in the network are old, and a significant percentage of that network has passed its useful life. The council has also experienced several high-profile pipe failures, which has affected levels of service. The council does not use information about the condition of its assets to cost and direct its investment in Three Waters. Rather, the renewal of assets has been forecasted largely based on the age of those assets, capped by what the council considered is affordable. Those taken together, age, there's also a renewals backlog. The condition of those assets creates uncertainty, and that, coupled with the affordability cap placed on the investment in the Three Waters, means that there's a greater risk of asset failures, reduced levels of service, and greater costs than forecasted. The second area where we have qualified is around the assumption in relation to the funding of city housing. In 2007, the council entered into a deed with central government. That deed provided that the council will stay in social housing until 2037. As part of that deed, the council is required to upgrade its housing by 2028. The cost of those upgrades are some $400,000. $400 million. That $400 million is currently not reflected in the underlying information. So it's not budgeted for and it's not funded for. Council is in discussions with central government to see if there are alternative funding options. At the time we're expressing this opinion, there's uncertainty as to whether those funding options will materialise. Therefore, we do not believe that the assumption is reasonable at this stage. We have also issued a number of emphasis of matters in our opinion, 3 of them. The first one is uncertainty over the delivery of the Three Waters capital program. This is because the council has increased its investment in the Three Waters over the next 10 years. Wellington Water has put a number of initiatives in place to deliver on the program, and that includes staging delivery of that investment. However, there's still a risk that the big work program will not be able to be fully undertaken. And that includes risks associated with limited resources, the COVID-19 environment, and also increased investment in Three Waters by other councils, which Wellington Water also services. The second area of emphasis is around uncertainty over funding of the sludge or wastewater treatment plant. So the council has budgeted for the cost of the sludge project, but it has not funded for it in its underlying information. And the reason for that, like with city housing, is the council is in discussions with central government to see if there is another funding arrangement that can be put in place. So we're drawing the reader's attention to some of those disclosures and the uncertainty at this stage around the ability to secure that funding. And the third area is around uncertainty over the Three Waters reforms. So in many councils' CD opinions this year, we have included a paragraph highlighting the reforms that are taking place at the moment. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I suspect there might be the odd 2 or 3. If we can keep it tight, though, please, councillors, because it is council. So councillors Fitzsimons, Rush and Pannett. Bondi and Calvert.
Well, thank you for your letter. Can I just ask a question, first of all, about the your comment around there not being enough information about the condition of Three Water assets in order to cost and direct the investment, and that we haven't done that, that we've done that only on the basis of age. So is your point that the infrastructure best practice is to do it on condition and that Wellington City Council hasn't done that sufficiently?
Martin, would you like to answer that question?
Thanks, Karen. The data shows that there's a significant backlog of assets that are beyond the end of their theoretical useful life. And yet, they're still in the ground, some of them working, some of them causing some disruptions. So we believe that the best practice is to do some work to understand the condition and performance of those assets, to determine whether those asset lives accurately reflect the actual lives that those assets will have in service and operation. Because the current level of data would show that there's significant assets past the end of their useful life. And if we believe that, then we should be dealing with that backlog or issue. But if we don't believe that, then we should really be trying to get some better quality data so that we understand the nature of those assets. And I think that is the point that we're trying to emphasise there.
My second question is related. You talked about the issues around the affordability cap in terms of water infrastructure. Is your point that we should have been prepared to borrow more in order to be able to do the job properly?
It's just an observation that you had an affordability cap. We do not have any comment on whether or not you should have borrowed more or not. That's a matter for council to decide.
Okay. And in relation to city housing, the non-inclusion of the 400 million, is your point that it should just be included, no matter how we are including it, whether it is to come from borrowing or rates funded or in whatever way? Is the main issue around qualification that just the lack of inclusion of that figure?
Sorry, it's the lack of inclusion of that figure, that it is not a discretionary spend. So in order for council to remain in social housing, obviously it's got responsibilities, and that includes maintenance and upgrades out to 2037. So the non-inclusion of the figure, the fact that it's not a discretionary spend, you are required to by your trust deed. Otherwise, there are very significant consequences. Payment of what you received from central government back in the day. And the fact that you are talking to central government, which is good, but there's uncertainty as to whether or not that funding will be received at this stage. So it's at a point in time.
Cool, thank you. And just finally, it's obviously quite a big deal to get a qualified audit, and I don't think Wellington City Council's ever had one before for a long-term plan. So can you just comment, as professionals in this area, what's the impact of that and how serious is it?
So the impact is just to make the readers aware as they are reviewing your consultation document, looking at the options, and some of them relate to, sizable investments, to take that into consideration.
Sorry, just finally then, so there's no impact on the credit rating? There's no, why is it such a significant thing that needs to be highlighted? Because it's obviously quite a big deal.
Yes, because the assumption in your underlying information is that, one would normally think that you've got it in your consultation document, so it's also in the underlying information, and in this case, it's not in the underlying information. So therefore, if your discussions with central government doesn't materialise, you don't get the funding through central government, then you will have to fund that 400 million in some way, and that would be debt rate.
Sorry, I wasn't talking about city housing. I'm talking about the Wellington City Council getting a qualified audit, being quite a big deal, and it's never having happened before for any long-term plan. And I understand it's only a handful of councils nationwide that get it. So I guess as professional kind of people that work in this field, I really want to understand what the significance of that is. Does it have an impact on our credit rating? Why is it so important that it's qualified, and what should that mean to us as governors?
As far as I'm aware, it doesn't have any impact on your credit rating. Okay. Governors need to be aware, I guess, that it is a significant risk that you do not have 400 million to budget and fund for a crucial service that the city provides.
I'll just make a general comment in support of what Karen said. We want the readers, the ratepayers, stakeholders to be as well informed as possible so that they can take part in democracy and respond to your consultation. The primary source of information that they've got is your consultation document, but that includes our audit opinion, and the way in which we express that is our opportunity to signal issues that we believe to be of importance to the readers so that they're as fully and well informed as possible.
Thanks. Councillor Condi.
Thank you. Just interested in the statement that you've made in your letter that, and I'm going to quote, that Wellington Water does not use information about the condition of its three waters assets to costs and direct its investment. I was surprised that's quite a strong statement. I wouldn't have been surprised if you'd said that they don't use enough or they don't rely on it enough, but for you to make a statement that they don't use it at all. Can you talk a bit more about your basis for that statement in your letter?
So my understanding is that there's two things going on in parallel. One is Wellington Water has put some funding scenarios to the council that are based on modelling using the ages of the assets to come up with a range of scenarios that you could fund. And I think one was essentially based on business as usual but an uplift. One was based on dealing with the backlog of renewals over a period of time, and one in the middle was a mixture of the two, if you like. It deals with the backlog but over a longer period of time. And largely that's based on the age profile of the assets, although I believe there is some analysis that's been done on particular asset classes within that. Separately, the best data available factoring in the condition and performance of the assets is used to develop the tactical plans that are implemented on an annual basis. But those are about spending the funding that's been allocated in the best possible way. They're different from a funding proposal being put to the council. So I think that's the distinction we're trying to draw there.
Just one follow-up question, and I think you've touched on them in response to Councillor Fitzsimons, but just to specifically state it, why did you decide that the sludge treatment plant should be an emphasis of matter, but the city housing needed to be qualified?
It's a very good question. So with city housing, there's no discretion. You're in it till 2037. With sludge and your waste minimisation policy, I guess you could say, okay, we will not comply with our policy. We will keep the sludge at the landfill. We'll keep processing sludge at the landfill as opposed to building a plant at Mile Point to deal with it. So it is discretionary by comparison. Also, with city housing, you've not budgeted for it, you're not funded for it. Whereas with sludge, you have budgeted for it, just not funded. So that's quite a big difference between the two.
And just finally, I guess I'm interested in the concern that a number of other councils often obviously have the same issue with not using condition assessment to develop funding proposals. But my understanding is that a number of other councils in the region have received an emphasis of matter rather than a qualification. So again, I was wondering if you could explain why for Wellington City Council you felt the qualification was necessary based on that Three Waters condition assessment data.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, yeah, you answer it.
I shouldn't have said that, should I? I should have let her answer it. Information needs to be good enough to inform the decisions that are being taken. And I think in the case of Wellington City Council, as I've highlighted, I think the data shows that there's about 30% of the water supply network that's in backlog, and I think about 20% of the wastewater network that's in backlog. So that's quite a significant challenge if it's real. Better condition and performance information applied to those ages might get us closer to understanding the reality of that position. And other councils may not have such significant decisions to make or may be further away from that crunch point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rush.
Thanks. Yes, water as well. So as I understand, the proposal that's going into the long-term plan, in fact, also funds that has been received by Wellington Water from the government, is already being deployed to undertake that critical infrastructure assessment. So does that in some way alleviate some of these concerns, or will we find, next year that as a consequence of having that data on the critical infrastructure, that these types of concerns will have been alleviated?
I think the work that Wellington Water currently has underway to gather further condition and performance information on the assets will exactly alleviate these concerns, or at least give greater certainty as to the renewal needs of the assets. So I think it's exactly the right thing to be doing, and doing more of that in the future will also be the right thing to do.
Thanks. Just though on those, dare I say it, non-critical pipes, laterals and so forth, which are much smaller and are much more difficult to really inspect. Is the methodology of assessing those based on age still a reasonable one?
We would expect condition and performance investigations to be focused on critical assets primarily. I think as an overarching comment, I would say that age profiling is appropriate, but you have to have a degree of confidence that those ages are correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Rush. Councillor Pannett. And then Councillor Calvert.
Thank you very much. I've got three questions. Apologies if I'm missing something, but why is Let's Get Welling Moving not highlighted as an issue? Because we do not have the money, and we certainly didn't 3 years ago. In fact, we put in about 110 last time for a $3 billion program. The second question is, given you've raised some concerns around Wellington Water, Do you feel they're on the right track now? In our consultation document, it says that we are well ahead of the game and well placed to respond collectively to a number of issues. And then the third question was, do you feel that we have adequately analysed the risks around climate change?
Let's get Wellington moving. So you have got $270 million in the plan for city street work, and flagged that the spend, a further spend of $1.4 billion may be necessary. The Let's Get Wellington Moving program is at its early stages. There are no business cases. You haven't committed to any projects. It is an informed item in your consultation document, and we are of the view that that's appropriate. Secondly, about Wellington Water. We've had very good discussions with Wellington Water. They've shared with us their initiatives and plans for stepping up how they're going to deliver on the increased investment in three waters across the regions. They have been able to provide that to quite good detail. We don't have any concerns with the information they've provided us around those plans. And thirdly, about climate change. So we've audited the decision around climate change and the options and the information presented, that it's fairly presented and transparent for public participation. We've also reviewed the significant forecasting assumptions, and they are appropriate as well. Thank you.
Thanks. And Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. And first part is basis for the qualified opinion, and that's the assumption for around city housing. And following on from Councillor Pannett, you talked about Let's Get Welly Moving. There were some other key areas that we haven't funded: venue upgrades and infrastructure growth. Is that the same reason why you didn't include those, because they're discretionary amounts like Let's Get Welly Moving?
Growth. You have funded and allowed for growth, population growth and economic growth. They are...
But not infrastructure growth, because that was one of the decisions in the CD document that was still to, along with Let's Get Welly Moving, along with city social housing, that was one of the things specifically called out that we hadn't allowed for to provide for community infrastructure. So that some of the inform items are at a point in time, Councillor, so it depends on what work has been done on them. Yeah.
So when they reach a particular stage, then they may be consultation items.
Okay. And you said you hadn't included Let's Get Welly Moving in terms of outside of the early deliverables, which we've got funding for, but the big stuff like State Highway 1 tunnels and mass rapid transit. Given that the government's, a couple of years ago gave their indicative package, do we not have a responsibility in this to address this in our document and how we would be spending that money?
Where you are at with the Let's Get Wellington Moving program, we believe it's been included in an appropriate way in your consultation document.
Okay. And you talked about you weren't comfortable with the around city housing, the funding, the discussions with government on the potential funding options. What is your understanding of where those are? Why weren't you comfortable about the conversations that we've been having with government for, I understand, quite some time?
My understanding is those conversations have been going and discussions have been going very well. There's just no certainty as to that funding right now on the day that we're issuing the audit opinion. So There's been no decision made about the funding, but my understanding is they're going very well.
But you've got nothing in writing to verify that you could put into this? No. So just under emphasis of matters, just are the two comments, delivery of Three Waters capital programme and the Three Water reforms. Are those comments similar to what you may have given to other councils, or is ours any different?
That they are tailored for each council, but quite similar, yes.
Okay. And just really curious to understand right at the back, in addition to this audit, you talk about the Clifton Terrace car park. And it just seems in the whole scheme of things really minor to mention about doing an audit of the revenue.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. We have to disclose our other involvement with the council for independence reasons, and so we have listed all the assignments that we undertake for the council.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Karen and Martin, a couple of questions from me, and they are on water and social housing. So the first one of them, I mean, overall, what you wanted to do with the way you expressed it to us is that you want to make sure that the information which goes to the people who are reading this is adequate for them to actually understand what's going on. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So if I take social housing, for example, which is in there, doesn't it spell out quite clearly things like, in a couple of years' time, it'll be insolvent, we're working with government, etc., to try and find a solution, etc.? Doesn't that kind of cover off the situation reasonably well? And you have worked through the wording with this as well, I understand?
Yes.
Does that not express the situation reasonably accurately?
Yes.
So the problem
My understanding is what is in there is fairly reflective of the situation.
So I guess what I'm questioning is, what is the problem if that is the case?
What is the problem?
What is the problem? I mean, you said that this is a problem.
Well,
You have great concern.
It impacts your ability to continue to provide those services. If you're solvent, haven't got any money or funding, then how are you going to provide those services in the future?
So I would have. I'm asking you the question is, aren't you trying to explain to the community, and aren't we trying to explain to the community there's a risk there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and you have done that.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, thank you. And the second component of that is, don't we also say that's in the why we need headroom for the future? We've got sewage, sludge, city housing. Let's get Wellington moving growth. Aren't we explaining again these are the risks that we face and why we're doing things the way we're doing them?
Yes. Council's done a good job in its consultation document to explain the issues, challenges that the community is facing and your options presented to deal with those.
Thank you. Okay, and the second question is with respect to Wellington Water. Have the requirements, look, in the toing and froing that's been going on, have the requirements of Wellington Water, are they significantly different to what they were 3 years ago in terms of the amount of information that's required? Because they've never had that condition assessment work done before, or they haven't done it for donkey's years, if ever, and they're now doing it. So have the goalposts moved is my question.
I think there's
You're
two
requiring
things.
a higher standard.
I think there's two things going on. Nationally, the data from the previous long-term plan audits indicates that there is deferral of asset renewals across the country. And some of that may be appropriate because it's not good value for money to replace assets before they reach the end of their lives. But some of it may be taking a risk for perhaps reasons of current affordability. So that's given us, auditors, the Office of the Auditor General, pause for thought, I think. And then secondly, to bring it locally, every 3-year long-term planning cycle, if there is a backlog of renewals that should have been done in the past, or a peak or a bow wave, as they call it, of future renewals sometime in the coming years, then every 3 years we're getting closer to that bow wave and we're getting a longer tail of renewals that are in backlog, aren't we? So the significance of the decisions that have to be made every 3 years ramp up. And I guess that varies for different councils depending where they are through that asset life cycle. The level of backlog is such that we felt it was appropriate to reflect that in our audit opinion this time.
Okay, look, thank you. But you didn't deem it was appropriate to do the same for the other councils in the region which are serviced by Wellington Water? You treat them slightly differently. I know you've explained that you think that's because the asset age is generally younger than Wellington's asset age. Is that fair?
Well, to answer your original question, we've asked Wellington Water for the same level of information for all of the councils that are serviced by Wellington Water. And then we've tried to judge that in the context of the issues faced by those councils and the significance of the decisions that they have to make. Comparing the age profile of the assets across the three waters for Wellington City to the other councils in the region would indicate that some of those councils are less far through the age of their assets than perhaps Wellington City is, and or those that have a similar backlog of renewals and a future bow wave of renewals may have taken a decision to fund at a different level. But either way, the point being, you have to consider the information and as to whether it's appropriate for the kind of decisions that are being made.
Okay, and look, the final question is, and I think you've covered this, but basically the trajectory that they're on to do the condition assessment, which we've given the extra money to do, and we used the extra money both from council and from government to do that. Understand that that is due in about August. Nod at the background. If we were doing this by the time they've digested that in, say, September or October, would we be in a different position with respect to Wellington Water than we are at the moment in terms of your concerns about the level of information?
So if I might add also, the big difference for the Wellington City audit was, if I could sum it up, is really age, your renewal backlog, the condition of those assets, your affordability cap, big investments in three waters, much bigger than other councils being serviced by Wellington Water, and all of this means there's greater levels of uncertainty.
So but to take that question, have we had that condition assessment work have been completed? And I know they only got the money, the bulk of the money in September, so obviously it takes time to do that. But if that had been completed and we were here in, I don't know, October-ish, and you had that information there, would you be feeling a lot more comfortable?
I would say so, which is why it's good that there's additional money from central government, and also the Wellington City are putting more money into the three waters as well. It's a big investment package over the next 10 years, and all of that is good in sorting out some of the issues with the infrastructure.
Thank you both for that.
network.
Councillor Condie wants to ask you another question. Yeah, two quick questions, thanks. And then we'll get on with the debate.
Thank you. As we said earlier, our Chief Executive has said that this is one of the most complex LTPs that she's worked on, and I was just wondering if you'd like to comment on this. Does this LTP have more significant decisions and more options in it than you would expect normally in an LTP?
I can say it's definitely got, you've got a lot of risks, issues and challenges, and you're responding to them in your LTP consultation document. It is by far the most complex one that I have audited, and the one that contains the most options. And I've audited more than 20, maybe 30 in total. So, yeah.
Thanks, Karen. And just finally, can you comment about how it's been to work with our staff on this audit that's been obviously quite challenging?
Yeah. So, both Wellington City and Wellington Water staff have been excellent to work with. You know, we've had many questions called on them, you know, day and night. Literally, in some cases, didn't expect them to answer at night time. But, you know, they've been very professional, really, you know, good knowledge and very, very helpful. So, you know, I do want to extend my thanks to you, management and staff at both organisations. We've received excellent help over the audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Martin. That's all the questions. So now we'll go to the debate.
Thank you.
Oh, do you have questions of officers? Any? Are there any questions of officers?
Yep.
About anything, but it can only be about things that have changed in the document.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about their response to the audit opinion. Is that a question? It's a city housing.
I think, okay. Way you go, Councillor Calvert.
Director, through the chair. Oh, Chief Exec, thank you. So obviously we've got a qualified opinion around city housing, which I don't think we were expecting. I think we understood there'd be something around the infrastructure, water assets. The auditor advised us that I got the impression, and I know I'm summarising, that the level of assurance in terms of being able to have a viable option, a solution going forward. Should we not be including some funding for city social housing in our consultation document? In terms of what it will mean for the rates or borrowing or...
Okay, through you, Mayor. Look, my comment is the items that have been pointed out by the auditor in their opinion are of no surprise to all of us, because these are issues that we have been talking about for some time. It is a very complex document, and one of the reasons that we are facing these kinds of opinions because the council is actually taking action on some very big, challenging issues that have been with us for some time. Now, one of the reasons you know that the CFO has recommended to you that we hold our debt to revenue ratio to 225% is that we are holding headroom above that for the possibility that we will still have to fund the $400 million for city housing, or can't remember the exact number, but is it around 180 million for sludge, and also headroom for some of the other unexpected issues. So we've kept headroom deliberately for both the known funding risks as well as the unknown, and we have explained it very clearly in the document, and the auditor, I think, is saying today that the explanation in the document is a good and acceptable explanation, but they are quite rightly pointing out the risk. So you're also aware that we're working very hard on finding ways to fund both of those major projects I've mentioned, sludge and city housing, or those programs of work off balance sheet, and that we're using the opportunity to be a leading council in New Zealand in that space, and we're making really good progress. So this is a matter of timing. If this is a statutory timeframe, we can't change, but if we could change it and wait a little longer, the answer may be very different. So I think I am confident we're on the right track.
Thanks, Barbara. Councillor O'Neill.
Can I ask a question of the auditors? Sorry, just one more.
Well, they're still at the table, so you might as well.
Yeah, is that all right? I'm just
please.
trying to...
Councillor O'Neill.
Oh, yeah. I'm just trying to ground some of my understanding of the letter. So in the letter, it says if the level of external funding is not achieved, under uncertainty over funding of wastewater treatment, if the level of external funding is not achieved, there could be an increase of debt from 147 million to 208 million and corresponding increase in the capital expenditure. And I just wanted to clarify that if we do not secure that external funding and we have a debt cap, what are the implications of that in a long-term plan sense? Does that now blow the debt cap? Does it contribute to an uncertainty risk around this particular asset?
Okay. Thank you for your question. So with the sludge and waste minimisation, under option 3 is council funding that project via debt. So yes, you would put debt on your books and it would exceed your current debt to revenue ratios or revenue to debt ratios, correct? Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Martin. So I'm going to, and I'm going to start off in introducing the paper by where Karen and Martin finished off, which was to say thank you to our staff because it is great to hear that feedback that both Barbara, you and your team, and Jeff and Julie and the team at Wellington Water that you are spoken of so highly in terms of the way in which you've engaged with Audit New Zealand. So really appreciate that. Look, this is first of all, can I say this is a consultation document. It's not the end of the road, and so I think we need to remember that it's a consultation document for consultation. And at the end of the consultation process, we will make some decisions, and it may look slightly different to what it looks like today. And that's the purpose. We've heard it described as being really, really complex. And the reason it's really complex is we are facing an unprecedented number of issues, and we're facing them all at once. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. But the other reason that we've just heard from Karen and Martin that it is challenging from an audit perspective is we've put options in there. And I think that's really, really good, because what that means is we don't just go to our community saying yes or no. We go to our community saying, you have a variety of different choices across a variety of different issues. Can you give us your feedback? And that what we hear from our community time and time again is that we don't give them options, that we put something out which is essentially a fait accompli, that we've already made the decisions and why should they bother? I think an LTP, which includes a lot of options, says we are actually listening here, and we've been thinking about which the right option is, and we're asking you which you think the right option is, and we're spelling out what the risks are and what we can deliver for any of the given options. And I think that is a really, really positive thing to say. In terms of what the LTP is about, it is about investing in critical infrastructure. It's about catching up, and I think you heard again from audit, but also from our management team. This is about catching up on some of the investment which probably should have been made in the past. So investing in infrastructure. It's investing in infrastructure also, which has had some challenges for things we didn't expect. I'll take the Kaikoura earthquake and the impact that has had on particularly Tanaka Civic Square, but also probably on our underground infrastructure as well and elsewhere. So we're investing in infrastructure. We are trying to manage those debt levels. Now, I think the answer, the question which has been asked, and I think Councillor O'Neill, you asked that question, would we blow our debt cap? Why have we got the debt cap? We've got the debt cap there at 225 so that if something happens that we need to go above it, we can do that. But it should be something that happens that we need to go above, not that we just choose to do it. And that's why we had such a strong debate about that. And that's why our CFO was saying, keep it at 225, because if you go above that, hey, if something went wrong with housing, if something went wrong with sludge, if you needed to invest more in Let's Get Wellington Moving, if we had another earthquake, if we had another lockdown, whatever the situation might be, that we have some capacity to be able to move. And that's why we've gone to 225 and why we haven't gone to 300 or we haven't gone to 280, which some people would have liked to go up. The reason we haven't done that is precisely to give us the capacity to be able to respond to the things we need to respond to, not the things which we just choose to respond to and we fritter away that and we lift it bit by bit by bit and then suddenly go, we haven't got the capability. And the other thing is we need to make sure that we keep our rates at a level which is, and I've used the term more or less tolerable, 14% hurts. That's a substantial rates increase. We've had debate about that. We've actually added some extra cost to that, which some of us had concerns about. I think we are going to have to show discipline in that area as well, and because it's not just 14% this year, we've also got to look at years as well and see what those do. So I think we need to be very, 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 very thoughtful about that, and I'm going to be really interested in hearing what our community says about that. But if we do want to pull it down, we've also got to be identifying where that comes from and what we don't do. And that's always challenging, because often people say to us, hey, it's too much. And you say, where would you save the money? And we often get silence back. So that's going to be one of the challenges for this consultation process. I said there's a lot of challenges which we face all at once. Well, they're quite well set out in the document. We're already building essentially on what was already an ambitious program in 2018, and that program is obviously very much in flight at the moment. That's why we're building Takina. That's why we're strengthening the town hall. That's why we're strengthening the St James. That's why we're building Omarara, although that was a decision that we made in this council. But there are already significant investments which are in flight, but what we do is on top of those things. So what do we face that's additional? Well, obviously the impacts of COVID. So that has an impact in two ways. One is that we, in the last LTP, the one going back to 2018, we were expecting to have a 7% rates increase last year. It was 5. So we actually took a couple of percent off there, and we've got to essentially catch that up in a way. The second bit is obviously that we have to also pay for the costs coming from COVID, the costs coming from the work that needed to be done on Mount Albert, the costs being in respect to the library, the cost in Tanaka Civic Square, sludge costs. There are a whole lot of different things there which were not necessarily contemplated, or certainly not remotely to the same scale as they are today. So the number which was in for sludge, for example, in 2018 was $30 million, which was a placeholder. We are nowhere near that in terms of the cost which we're facing at the moment now that the work's actually been done. So there are some significant challenges and some significant new additions. In terms of that rates rise, the underspend last year I've already mentioned, COVID I've already mentioned. We've put extra money into water, the condition assessment which our auditors have said that we needed to do. The immediate reaction we had to the breakages last year was to put another couple of $1 million into water condition assessment, and obviously we followed that up with additional resourcing for renewals. So we're trying to make sure we're actually getting on top of renewals. We've always fully funded depreciation, but that depreciation hasn't necessarily gone into the assets that they needed to go into. I've already mentioned temporary libraries and libraries, etc. So there's a lot of things which are driving that expenditure increase. And I'm just going to finish off just by a couple of the issues which were raised in the audit. And the first one of those, as I think Barbara said, that there's a degree to which there's an issue of timing here. So if we were in a position in 6 months' time, and the condition assessment work which we have provided money for, which we took some of the government's money for the first stage of the water reforms for, if we had had that condition assessment completed, Wellington Water would be in a much better position to be able to say, look, this is the state of our assets, this is what our plan is going to be, this is where we need to invest, where we don't need to invest. Because what you don't want to do, and I think Karen, you highlighted that, or Martin, you highlighted that, you don't want to be pulling assets out of the ground just because they've reached the end of their natural life, or their theoretical life, if they're perfectly good. You want to pull them out because there's something wrong with them. And that's the key about condition assessment. So we'll be in a much better place in, after the August work which has been done to be able to answer that. And the second one is about the risks around social housing. Actually, I think we're doing this the right way. I think we've spelled out quite clearly what the risks are and the process that we're going through. And I think we will be exceptionally foolish actually to put the money into the budget straight away, because what would that say? And I'd like to invite you to think about that. I think that would be a very, very foolish thing to be doing at this stage. So with that, with that, Councillor Matthews. With that, I'm pleased to move the draft long-term plan and to look for a seconder and to look with enthusiasm to the consultation process, to the feedback from our community on all these really complicated issues which are about setting our city on the way forward to being a stronger, more resilient city with better infrastructure. And I think we look forward to some of the exciting things. For example, the conversation we were having today about Tanaka Civic Square, the library. We've got some really exciting things which are in this budget or being thought about in this budget. So I'm going to move and looking for a seconder. Councillor Calvert. Do you wish to speak? Okay.
Yeah, look, just very briefly, I want to start in joining the Mayor in thanking the officers for the extensive work that has gone into this. I know we only see the half of it, maybe even less, but yeah, I just want to genuinely acknowledge that this has been a hard slog and a lot of work. And also I think it's really clear from this document, but also just looking around Wellington, that our city is facing many, many challenges. And I guess I want to just put on the record, I won't be voting against this, but I do want to put on the record my concern that some challenges I think are being met by this proposed long-term plan, but I think that we are creating a whole lot of other future problems for our city. I'm very concerned that there are many aspects and many areas of much needed investment in Wellington which are not included in this proposed long-term plan. For example, a significant urban upgrade of Courtney Place, a citywide social and affordable home building program, and also fixing the embarrassing mess of the Island Bay Cycleway as previously agreed, which is not currently the preferred option. So in my view, it's a plan that does fix some problems, but creates a whole lot of other problems. I don't think that we've got the debt limit right. I think it's too conservative. We should use this opportunity to borrow more so that we're not creating the same sorts of problems we're seeing in water infrastructure by the same sort of approach we adopted in the past. It's not a plan that I'm confident can address the challenges that our city's facing. And I think, unfortunately, the approach to constrained borrowing and cost cutting has meant that we haven't been visionary for Wellington in the way that residents need us to be. I'm very optimistic about the consultation. I've heard already feedback from many people about what they want to see for their city and what they want to see our council do. So I'm certainly optimistic that we will see some changes result from the consultation. One particular area that I want to see the council being far more active on is around affordable housing. We have a huge portfolio of land and assets across the city. We should be building mixed housing developments. We should be borrowing more and building more homes. We should put a affordable housing lens over every piece of land and every lease and every existing asset that this council has to make sure that we're building as many affordable homes as we can as a council. And obviously that won't solve the problem alone, but I really want to see the council playing a much more proactive role as anticipated by the housing strategy. And I'm certainly, that's why I asked for a signal to be included around affordable housing, and I'm certainly of the view that this council can be much more proactive in taking our share of responsibility to build more affordable housing for Wellington residents because it's desperately needed.
Thank you, well timed. Councillor Young.
I love the speech limits, so yes. Thank you to all the officers for all the work that I could possibly not even contemplate doing, real brain crunching stuff. So I absolutely support the long-term plan going to public consultation, but do not assume that I accept to support everything in the long-term plan. There is much that I do not agree with. As I think I've made pretty clear, I think all of us agree that infrastructure is the top of our list of priorities, but I'm also very concerned that Wellington remains affordable if it is to remain livable. And if we keep increasing what we do, what we offer to Wellingtonians, but we never decrease our levels of service. So I'm very concerned that over the next 3 years, I think we have a rates increase of 30%, which is pretty chilling when you also look at the values of houses in Wellington with I think a revaluation next year. So we're borrowing money for operational expenditure, which of course is totally against my own personal philosophy, but that's really because we don't want to say no. And we're lumbering residents, today's residents, tomorrow's residents, your children, your grandchildren with debt that I hope they can afford. For some of those things, it's fine to have debt for major things like the water infrastructure. It's not for the nice to haves. And we are continuing to stick it to commercial property owners with the rating differential that was increased a couple of years ago. I do think there's far too much political ideology around this table and not enough reality. Interest rates can go up. Interest rates will go up. I can remember when interest rates were over 20%, and I tell you, it is really terrifying. I think we should be far more cautious in our spending of ratepayers' money. It is not our money. So the other thing, there are just a couple of things that stick out in my mind, just small snippets, just a sort of little picture of where my thoughts are. One is I am really concerned about the weekend parking rates going from $2 to $4.50, especially, Your Worship, when you campaigned to get rid of weekend parking things. So I think that's a real horror. And I know there'll be a lot of pushback from Wellingtonians because retail and hospo are struggling and we don't need to make it any more difficult for them. And of course, I am very concerned about the long-term plan rates postponement, which I think is like a reverse mortgage. I think it's a really insidious way of doing our finances, because I think we should just be cutting our costs. But I think all that. There's no surprises. My fingers are crossed that future ratepayers will be able to service the debt and repayment that, if this goes through, we are lumbering them with. My fingers are crossed that they'll be able to fund the operational costs of the bigger asset base, and my fingers are crossed that Wellingtonians will rise up and let their voices be heard. No demonstration.
Councillor Day.
Kia ora. So my thanks go out to everybody who's been working on this. I do know that there have been some ridiculous late nights for our staff, and for that, thank you, and hopefully that is going to be a thing of the past from now on. But thank you for the time you've put into bringing it together. I'm going to speak just very quickly around the car parking, because of course it was an amendment that I put forward. And I just want to say that I understand the frustration from the business community about the proposed increases to parking charges, and I share their frustration. These charges at the moment are not final and will likely be reduced if that is the result of the consultation with the community. The proposed charges came about as a result of councillors desperately seeking to avoid last-minute changes and cuts, in particular to our library book buying budget, and looking at properly funding the implementation of Te Ata Kura, our climate change strategy, and to ensure that council upholds Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So the proposed increased charges may well have been avoided if we had, as councillors, been able to be more involved and not be looking at little ways to try and create revenue. I strongly encourage those who have concerns to submit on the long-term plan. These proposals are not set in stone, and reductions are both likely and possible. And I just want to speak with regards to Councillor Young's comments about interest rates going up. No one can predict that. I remember during the global financial crisis, everyone was saying that the interest rates were going to go crazy. We're all going to be hit really hard, and it kind of never really came to the extent that people thought. So I think the thing that I've learned is that Wellington will remain livable and affordable when we invest in the city, and it's already starting to show, particularly down in Courtney Place, that we haven't been investing in the way that's needed in our infrastructure. And it's not just about the pipes under the road, it's also making sure that the space is safe and inviting for people to be there, and we need to make sure that we keep doing that, because it will mean that businesses feel confident in the fact that we're investing in a city that delivers for the people who live here now and the people who want to live here in the future. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing the feedback from the community. I do understand that this is a huge rates increase, but sometimes we have to do these things to make sure that we're making the progress we need to.
Councillor Pannett.
Kia ora, and of course I'd like to add my thanks to staff for the work they've put into. So I think it would be true to say of local government, you always hear the same arguments. It doesn't matter where you are in the country. So first of all, people will complain about the rate level. No one ever likes it. Parking is always a hot issue. No one seems to like paying for parking. And then we always have the arguments around nice to have. Apparently, housing is now a nice to have. Good water infrastructure, libraries, swimming pools, just all the basic stuff that we actually fund. I have never seen these nice to haves, really. I would like them pointed out to me. I think I would find that helpful. So I'd like to support the comments of Councillor Fitzsimons. The reason we have problems is because we haven't spent enough money and we need to spend some more. And that's why, of course, I supported raising the debt level. And I just want to reflect on risk, because I heard some quite extraordinary statements. If we have to pay for Let's Get Welling Moving, we have already committed to doing that. And the auditor's response was interesting. We know it's not going to cost over $200 million to fund Let's Get Welling Moving. It's going to cost over $1 billion. So where are we supposed to find this magic money? Obviously, we can talk to the government, but we are going to, one, need new funding tools, and two, spend some more money. And we are going to have more earthquakes, and people are continuing to need housing. We've always known that we need lots more social housing. Climate change is coming. There you go, my friend isn't here, so I can wax lyrical. Councillor Day, climate change is still happening too. Parking is still a key lever to make sure that we address those issues around climate change. It is coming. None of these things are unexpected, and we need to plan for them. So that's why you heard my frustration this morning, that we actually do need to plan in quite a lot of detail about all of the expenses that are coming up and plan for them, because they are coming up. And to leave the next generation of councillors with a massive problem is probably not the best way forward. So I think we should be bold, ambitious, and make some politically unpopular decisions when it comes back in June. People might not like it, but if you want a great city, you need to be prepared to pay for it.
Thanks, Councillor Pannett. Anyone else? Councillor Condie. Necessarily encouraging, but...
Thank you. I will speak despite your lack of encouragement. I just wanted to talk a bit about the Three Waters investment having been on the task force, and just the fact that, you know, it might seem strange to people out there in the community that we've actually gone with our preferred option being the middle option rather than the most expensive option. And I think, and particularly I wanted to speak about this because of the Auditors report that talked about our Three Waters investment being capped by affordability. And obviously the debt cap is important, and there are limits to affordability. But I think really our choice to go for the middle option on Three Waters investment was driven more by concerns about the capacity of the industry to be able to deliver. I think we had very serious concerns that if we went with the high investment option, we would simply be taking people's money through their rates but not actually able to spend it because there aren't enough contractors around to deliver the work. So there's a certain amount of ramping up that we need to do that middle option allows us to do. The other thing that I think was really important in that decision was about trying to deliver good value for money in terms of how we prioritise the program. And as we get more asset condition assessment data, which we've just been talking about with the auditors, that is coming, we'll be able to have a much better plan about what those priorities are for investment. Whereas at the moment, if we were to look at the highest option for investment, it is almost a little bit of a blank check without it being really clear exactly what we would be investing in because we don't have some of that data. So I just wanted to kind of take that opportunity to talk about that. I think the middle investment is not, you know, I think all of us here would have been willing to invest more in Three Waters if that seemed like the prudent thing to do. But in this case, because of those concerns about industry capacity and value for money, that's really what's driven our choice to go into this middle option as our preferred option rather than affordability. It'll be interesting to see how that lands with our community, and it will be great to hear back from our community during consultation about this and many other issues that are in our long-term plan and significant challenges that we're facing.
Thank you. I'll go now. Look, just to re-emphasise, both our officers and the auditor have said this is a particularly complex plan, and through not only the issues we're dealing with, but also the options that we've got appearing in our consultation document. And thanks to the officers, I think what they've, all the work that they've done, because actually what you've had to do is bring together quite a diverse range of views across this table, and that has not been an easy challenge at the best of times. So thank you, officers, for that. Just a couple of things that some of the colleagues have mentioned. I think we just got to remember we are increasing our debt by quite a bit. Last year our debt was at around about the 120% debt-to-income ratio. Now next year we're increasing that up to over 225% if we allow for the overspend through doing the library. And also, I just want to touch on parking. And this is a problem when we do, as councillors, put in last-minute amendments. I know on the day there was about 20 last-minute amendments put around this table by councillors without, and ignoring sometimes officers' advice. Officers advised us to their recommendation was to put up parking fees by 50 cents an hour, and that would still mean that we were recovering over 140% of the charges on those on parking. When we put a charge up by $2 an hour, that is price gouging. So even just to suggest that, I think it's causing a lot of angst that didn't necessarily need to be there. And in particular, for our businesses, our hospitality, our retail at the weekend, they need all the support they can get. And we've also got to remember that there are some parking buildings where you can park for $6 a day. So we actually may end up, at the weekend, with not getting the income that we'd hope to get because people will choose not to use parking on the street. But our commercial businesses, whilst we, for residential, is an average of 13.5% increase, businesses are going to be facing a 16.5% on average. And this is at a time when a lot of them, some of them are struggling. And so we've got to be careful of what messages we send, and that's why I'm very pleased that we're going out for consultation on that. Like my colleague here, Councillor Young, said, we need to get the feedback back from people, and hopefully they will be telling us what they think and where we're choosing to spend the money. So we could borrow more. We've got some headroom, but we've also got a lot of unfunded items, and in particular, I'm really concerned about our city social housing, that after a couple of years of discussions with central agencies, we haven't actually got a solution on the table. So, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Perfectly timed. Anyone else? Councillor Matthews.
Kia ora koutou, and I would just quickly note that those amendments weren't last minute from councillors. They were actually at the first minute, which was our first opportunity we had to amend this long-term plan. So I guess I just want to make the point that cutting rates and cutting services is ideological, Councillor Young. It's just a different ideology, and I don't think anybody ever said that your hero, Margaret Thatcher, was not an ideologue. Pretty sure she is. Heroine, sorry. I guess, and I also was thinking about the sort of point you made about future generations, and I would particularly link that to the climate change issue. And I'll be there on Friday with our strikers, and I think that if there's anything we should do, if there's anything we can do that's going to make a difference on climate change, we need to do it now. There makes absolutely no sense in putting anything off, because not only will it get more expensive, but our ability to make a difference will be reduced. And I think that applies also to a just transition, as you were talking about with parking, that we need to ensure that the costs are are fairly distributed in terms of the people of our city. And so, yes, I'd particularly like to note that we're not completing a cycle network, for example, which is something that it strikes me we should do, as soon as we can, and also the supporting infrastructure to densify our city. So it's not only about taking on more debt, it's also about how quickly we pay it off. And I think that, when we talk about sort of rainy days, I think most Wellingtonians would see the need for investment as quite dire and urgent now. And, when we're talking about the affordability of our city, I know the rates increase will be hard for some people. However, the main problem with affordability in Wellington is people cannot afford to live here. They cannot afford to buy property. They cannot afford to rent. And that is actually the most massive risk alongside climate change that we face as a city. When borders open, we are going to lose skilled people if they can't live here. And I actually think that that is huge for this plan, and the cost of not doing things, so cost and risk, I think we can't just see that in terms of what we do. We absolutely have to see it in what we don't do. Kia ora.
Thanks, Councillor Matthews. Going once? Anyone else? Otherwise, I'll reply. Right, okay. They didn't all have to speak, so that's fine. Okay, look, Councillor, thank you very much for the debate. A few things to pick up that people raised. Councillor Fitzsimons, look, it was interesting to hear you, and then followed by Councillor Young, sort of diametrically opposite directions in terms of spend more, spend less. But that's democracy, isn't it a wonderful thing? So, Councillor Fitzsimons, you mentioned a few things, three things in particular you mentioned. Courtney Place, and I was just looking back just to check the number. So we have put a money aside for Te Aroha Park in particular, which obviously is a particular problem area in terms of safety at the moment. So we put that there, and we're working towards making sure we deliver something there which will improve the safety, and of course working with all of our other partners, because it's not just about us, it's also about what other people can do there as well to help make both Te Aroha Park but also the whole of Courtney Place a safer place. The other part, of course, is that as part of Let's Get Wellington Moving, when it actually gets moving and we actually start getting some delivery, the Golden Mile is going to see some investment, not just in moving vehicles through it, but in the urban space that it moves through. And obviously Courtney Place is part of that. So I think you can expect that we've already seen some ideas around that when the consultation went out a few months ago. But so clearly there will be investment in that area of the city, both directly through council and also through Let's Get Wellington Moving. Island Bay Cycleway, you also mentioned. Look, we know that's something we've been told that if we went and did it straight away, we'd be on our own. NZTA would not be alongside us. But if we make it as part of a wider package, there is a chance of being able to do that. So that, I think, is the right way to do things. In terms of citywide program of investment, look, I am keen to see us investing in a housing program in terms of delivering more housing. So we've got social housing over there, but in terms of investing in housing stock generally, but we need to make sure we set that up properly. And I think that's a piece of work we do need to do. And in fact, Barbara and Liam and team are already working on doing that. And I think that is going to be an important thing going forward. And it's, of course, something which actually I'd advocated for several years before this. Should have happened in the last council, didn't happen in the last council. And so I hope that we can make some traction on that over the next 12 months so that we can actually have that conversation this time next year when we actually got something which has some structure around it, because you don't just want to throw money at things, you want to have some structure around doing that. In terms of a huge portfolio of assets and land, I've got some ideas, but I'll be interested to see where this huge portfolio is, because if it's some parts of our people keep on looking at the Berrinpool golf course. Some parts of it are going to be very, very difficult. There are some parts which are going to be easier. So let's have that conversation, and I will look forward to that. Councillor Young, I think I've already commented on the fact that you have, difference of view that you have, and it's welcome difference of view that you have between you, because it's about democracy. I think both you and Councillor Calvert raised concerns about the weekend parking increases, and you're absolutely, I agree with you. I thought that was a tad arbitrary, to put it mildly. I think that will be something which will hurt the city if it goes through in the way it is proposed at the moment. We do need to support our business community, because at the end of the day, that is both the lifeblood of the city, but also it is what makes the city the downtown area of the city vibrant. If we don't have a solid business community, solid retail community, we are going to be much the worse for it. So it's going to be really interesting to see what feedback we have, not only on the weekend parking, but also on the coupon parking, which was truly a late amendment, about as late as I've ever seen. Councillor, first chance that one was raised right at the end of the debate of going, oh, what bright idea can we come up with next? Councillor Pannett, yeah, I think you had the same. You're absolutely right in terms of Let's Get Wellington Moving. Obviously, we don't know the shape of what we're actually going to invest and how much it is going to be. We know it's going to be challenging in affordability terms. That is another one of those reasons that headroom is going to be required. And you are 100% right that we will need new funding tools. We cannot just do everything through rates. And Let's Get Wellington Moving has always been predicated on the local share not just being rates, but also things like congestion pricing, which of course this council on a split vote decided that it wasn't going to support at that particular point in time. And also that, and I think it would have been, if we'd had 15 here, I think it would have gone through. But, there was division on that. That was a funding tool and also a behavioural shift tool for Let's Get Wellington Moving. And likewise, long stay parking levies, and I do say long stay. Thank you, Councillor Condy, for your comments around water capacity of the industry to deliver. And it's not just water. I think, Councillor Matthews, you said cycleways, we should do more. But we had clear advice from our officers that said there's only a certain capacity to deliver. There is no point in us going out with an illusory, we're going to spend all this money on something which we actually can't deliver. We've got to be realistic, not only about the money we put in, but also about the capacity to deliver it. And that's the skilled staff, the skilled workforces. And we got clear advice from our staff that there was a certain amount they could stretch to, but there's a certain amount they couldn't in that particular space. With that was cycleways, but it's true of water as well, it's true of our built infrastructure. And I think our auditors have said exactly that. We can't go and promise something we can't deliver. Stretch, yes. Impossible, no. So we've got to be careful about that. And Councillor Calvert, I think I've already covered the issues around parking. And Councillor Matthews, just to finish, look, I think the issue of how much you invest is an important one, but the key, I think, I would say to all of us is we've got to make sure that what we invest well. You said that affordability is an issue for people who are renting, for people who are, who own property. That's important. But I know that a lot of people, particularly the people who are on fixed incomes, who are going to be saying, this is really going to hurt and it's going to make life really, really difficult to afford. So we've got to be very, very careful. And our business community would say the same thing. We've got to make sure that what we invest wisely, and we look at everything carefully as though it were our own money. So I'm really looking forward to the feedback we get. I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever it will be feedback which comes from all sorts of different perspectives, and our challenge will be able to work our way through that to talk to people, but also to listen to people, and then come up with the actual final solution in terms of our LTP at the end of June. So councillors, I look forward to your voting now, to your support, and then we look forward to the consultation. And then we'll sign the letter of representation, yes indeed. Councillors, thank you very much. So we will now do the signing, Karen. Do you want to come up? Thank you, councillors. That brings us to the end of the meeting, so I'd ask you all to stand and we will say the concluding karakia. Unuhia, 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 ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatu. Koia rā e rongo. Whakaria aki ki runga. Kia wātia, kia wātia. Councillors, thank you. Officers, thank you. Auditors, thank you. And media, thank you as well. And that concludes the meeting.